Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tuesday Night Live with Dr. Boz. And I am happy to say that I am here. I'm just going to turn off my music in the background and stop my little jamming out here. I think I'll stop my jamming out. Oh, I know I'm pushing the wrong button on that too. Here we go. Well, hold on. There we go. All turned off. Welcome to Tuesday night. We have a great show for you tonight. I am picking up from the rave response of everybody last week, dialing in and asking the questions in the Neurons page. Again, the Neurons are a group of people that have been following the Dr. Boz process for, I don't know, a couple years, 3 years maybe. And it's a place where you can gather questions and be in a like-minded community that that answers your questions and really thanks for the sound affirmations. Those are my real people. They know that that's super important for my show, that you tell me you can hear me. And I have some interesting announcements. I mean, they're fun announcements, but they're announcements that I was going to try and do last week. But before we get started on that, we're going to do a few traditions. And one of them is checking the numbers on this show, and I would love to skip this tonight because I've had a heck of a week. I think just like the whole country, the ability to contract Omicron COVID might have landed in my world too, and I got really under the weather starting about Christmas Eve, and now really slowly coming out of that. So I'm going to start with my glucose number here. And again, I wish I could skip this. I wish I could just say, nah, I'm going to let it go. But I'm a big believer that there are several things that when you just keep the method and you stay consistent, that the accountability of just being transparent, that I'm human. So yeah, glucose is 78, ketones are 0.9, and honestly, I think that's remarkable for how I feel. I have been keeping my one meal a day, and we have a wrestler in our family, and there was a wrestling tournament on Monday, the 27th of December, which meant our Christmas holiday was very minimally celebrated with sweets and stuff because he had to make weight. So I am watching your comments over here, but I have a couple of other things. So yeah, I am checking my numbers. I am going to also sip on some ketones and maybe give you a little insight to hear what happens when I get sick. And that is, I don't know, when you're the mom and you're the one person in charge of the clinic, it's hard to be sick. Thankfully, I've not had any patients, so that's great. But there's still plenty of things I was trying to get done over this kind of lull before the storm of the next year. And that usually means I'm going to push really hard. And I can tell you that my body just said, stop that. I'm going to make it really hard for you to push hard. A couple things I have done while being sick, though, is I tend to love the creative side of my life, and there is a fundraiser for tuition coming up for the school, and they asked me to make something out of the neckties that the seniors wear at this all-boys Jesuit school. And I spent the day, actually about 3 days, playing around with this app these patterns and sewing a gift to auction off at the at this charity event. So I'm going to show you, see if I can pull up the picture of it here. Library recent, here we go. So here is a picture. Let's see if I can. Here is a picture of the bear I made out of neckties. And I'll tell you, please tell me it looks like a tiger. It's not a bear, it's a tiger. But you can kind of see the tail there over on the side. And the key thing was when I'm sick, I like to do creative things because I do not sit still very well, but I hope it brings a lot of money because it took me a long time. And that's what I did while I was sick. In true form, like when most people are sick, I was comforted with food as a kid. So it's easy to fall back into that trap of saying, I just need food when I feel sick. But the best thing you can do when you are sick, especially if you're fat adapted, which I am, is to fast, is to not feed an illness. Especially when you've got the history of insulin resistance, your white blood cells aren't going to work as well, your brain's not going to work as well, your body's not going to get better faster. So as I worked on that dang tiger, don't call it a bear like I just did, call it a tiger, it's a tiger. I asked one dad and he said, it looks like an aardvark. And I'm like, no, it's not an aardvark, it's a tiger. Anyway, it's all made out of the neckties that the seniors who don't have to wear neckties the last semester of their school donate back to, I don't know, the moms that try to raise money for this charity event. And we're going to auction it off in February along with a bunch of other things. This is just a minor thing. All right, I'm going to drink some ketones and we're going to do a couple of other quick announcements. I don't have it set up to show you the website here tonight, but I am going to say that if you go to bozmd.com, that thing down there is a pop-up that we are going to have turned on our site that just allows you to get some updates from us. We have really not been great about newsletters. We've focused our energy on storytelling and education through our books and our online courses, and then this Tuesday night YouTube, as well as other things on YouTube. But we have heard your feedback that some people really like to just read when there are updates on YouTube. So we've got a few things that we're planning for the first part of the year. If you haven't signed up for that little, if you've downloaded anything off of our site, like the free ebook or the spreadsheet where you can calculate your Dr. Boz ratio because it's all kind of worked in, then you're on the list. But if you haven't downloaded one of those or haven't signed up for that, those emails, I would encourage you to do it at least for the next few weeks, just to share with what we're trying to do, which is at the Dr. Boz channel. We know there's been a lot of content we've put out over the last few years, and it's kind of scattered. The scattered part of it is different seasons of my life, trying to update the process of what I use in the clinic while putting out, writing a couple of books, moving across the country, having a few kids graduate from high school and get into college. So there's just a lot that's been going on. And I feel we've had lots of people write in to poor Angela and say, where's that one video that does this? Or how do I find this series of this? So we've worked really hard over the last 6 months to try and organize our YouTube channel a little better into playlists that seem to be a lot more reasonable. Some really hardcore work that's gone into that. And we're going to share some of those resources with you. So the email campaign that's going to come out is all just to help you connect with the resources that are free and out there on the Dr. Boz channel. But due to a bit of a whirlwind of how this has transitioned, that's probably not as organized as it should have been. So if you want to sign up for that, we'd love to have you as part of our team. A couple of other announcements. We are going to go through live questions tonight, and there's some really good ones, so I want to get to that. But the two other things that I want to announce were that I had one person put in a review for the books over the last week. It was for the workbook, and I'm just going to read it out loud instead of go to that page but it was by Ciara Dawn, and it is the workbook. I came across Dr. Boz a couple of years ago, and she has changed my life. I love how she teaches and how her workbook takes the guessing out of keto. I'm working on breaking generational chains of unhealthy living and habits. Dr. Boz is making this insane task easier with her knowledge and lessons. Thank you. And she wrote that on December 26th. So thank you so much. It's the best compliment is to when people slow down and take time to put a review in for one of the books that I've written. I don't have a marketing campaign. I don't have a marketing team. I have you. I have you to write reviews, and I have word of mouth, which I've found cuts through a whole bunch of somebody put in one on Audible. So I'm sorry I didn't check Audible right before that, so I will totally go look. Thank you. I read all of the reviews, so thank you for writing them. If I missed yours, I'll get it next week. All right. So as much as I thought the Omicron virus was going to stop me from my forward progress, I did my little sewing as a nurture campaign for me. And I didn't skip today's show, but I did only make it through one day of my son's wrestling tournament. I had to come home. I was just too sick. So I spent hours in bed and didn't do my teaching lessons today with my brains course. I postponed it because I thought I was going to be at a wrestling tournament, but I was really in bed till about almost noon today. It was terrible. I am feeling better, and that's why I'm here tonight. I almost canceled the show, but actually the questions that you guys wrote in were super inspiring to me. So I'm like, oh, I can do this. And the truth is there's keeping a pattern in your life, even when you're feeling under the weather, is super helpful. The final announcement, I had several of you write in saying, okay, we're in the Tampa area. I even saw a couple people say that they were from Treasure Island, and my family and I live in Madeira Beach for this year, which is a long ways from the school, but that's where we live. So if you are looking for a support group, I have finally secured a place to do the support group, and I have all the other things in place that I really needed to do before starting a support group here in Tampa. You can start a support group. You're not a physician. I needed to do a few things to make sure everything was kosher. And I did that, finally got a couple things done right at the last week and a half. But there is a bowling alley right next to my office. So my office is on Armenia Avenue at 4809. And there is a Pin Chasers, otherwise known as a bowling alley, right next door. And there's nobody at the bowling alley at 8 o'clock on Tuesday mornings. And the administration there has allowed me to rent the room that they do, must be birthday parties or something in. But it's got enough chairs and space for people to meet. This is my free support group that I encourage people to do if you're on the keto journey and you're trying to get your family or your mother or your neighbor or your husband or your wife to do keto. The right thing to do is to just keep working on you and help other people. I practice what I preach, which is me holding a free support group for if you want to do keto from 8 to 9 on Tuesdays. I will be there to answer questions, and I will take on your attendance, your ability to ask me questions and just to have the improvements in your health be partnered with mine. Somebody just wrote in and said, do you definitely have COVID or do you just not feel well? I don't feel well. I didn't test. I haven't been around anybody but my family, and I've been vaccinated. So it's like, well, okay. I don't know that I need to prove if I have it right now, but good Lord, it was awful. All right, so that support group, one more time, is Tuesday mornings, 8 to 9 o'clock here in Tampa, Armenia Avenue, at the Pin Chasers, which is right next to my office at 4809, and you are welcome to come. You do not need any further invitation than that, and I hope to see you there. I really do. It's really one of the best ways for me to stay accountable about the things I'm trying to work on. I really enjoy teaching, and especially as I've just had limping along to try and get the clinic open. I'm so looking forward to people asking me questions in person and doing some live teaching and answering those questions, showing you the journey, which is not super exciting, but it is life-changing. All right, so we are 15 minutes into this story, and I haven't answered a single one of your questions, so let me get right to it because you did write in some great questions. Let's hop over to that. Here we go. All right, so here are the live questions from December 28th. And again, I got these from you guys. Some of them I didn't get answered last week, so I carried those over, or they ended up in the poll that we put them on this sheet as well. And I'm going to use several of these teachable moments. Let's start with Gail, who says keto for 3 years. Why do some people have consistently low ketones even after long fasts, like 72 hours? Is it important to try for high ketones? That's actually a really good question. So when you're looking at the place that ketones should take the center stage, it is during a stress. And what you are watching for is how well your body responds to that stress. When you look at, I'm just going to go over to this part right. Here we go. So when looking at this, oh no, don't do that, don't do that. There we go, this way. When looking at the keto continuum, as you watch, as I think Gail writes in, she marched herself all the way down to the final part of the keto continuum, which has to do with fasting for up to 72 hours. So let me see here. I want to go to keto continuum and then just, hold on here. There we go. So if we go right there. So she takes this all the way to a 72-hour fast, which is incredible. But what's the purpose of that? Why would I have somebody do a 72-hour fast? I'm watching them stress their metabolism and record what did your body do during that stress. So if she's somebody who's been consistently keto for several years now, I'm going to assume that that she has, gone past the 16-8 and probably keeps her eating window probably less than 8 hours. I would guess most people that are doing a 72-hour fast, the rest of the time during the week, their eating window is probably in that 4 to 5 hour range. Again, you don't go from 16-8 to 23-1 overnight. I know it's one step on the keto continuum, but it really is this gradual improvement. So when somebody says they got a 72-hour fast and their ketones are still really low, I would want to double check that they're doing a couple things. First of all, that they're looking at blood ketones. It is a time that during the fasting, you do want a better measurement of the ketones. So I hope that means she's using one of the little things I prick my finger on before each show. Speaking of which, I want to remind you have just a couple days left if you want 25% off of the kits that come from ForaCare. ForaCare.com, go to the shopping cart and look for the kits. And there's some, I can have one of my helpers put the link in the show notes, but also in the chat here for you too. That 25% off is only something they offer me when I twist their arm. So I got it for the month of December this year. If you want to look at the best way to stock up on a meter as well as strips, that's how you do it. Or if you know somebody who's starting on the keto diet, you don't need the meter until you get to this advanced stage though. So when they start to write in and say, gee doc, I'm not doing very well with making those ketones higher, does it really matter? Especially if you're looking for autophagy, you're looking for that healthy version of you. It is measurable. This is that Dr. Boz ratio that we talk about. But what I would be curious about is, does she have a pretty solid control of the eating window during the non-fasting days? That would be one place that I would try to tighten up that history. Make sure that if you're really looking to push that ketone production, which is valuable, not all the time. I don't need you to have really super high ketones from morning to night. I need you to have pretty good ketones during the time when you're not fasting. And then when you fast, I want to see you burst those ketones up and drop that glucose down to, I'd love it if it gets in the 60s and low 70s. But if you're not seeing those ketones rise, either during the times when you're not fasting, you're not pushing the metabolism enough. Sometimes it's an eating pattern that we talk about and we discover. And again, we do this a lot at our support groups. I look at looking at the pages of that workbook. I can lightning speed see a pattern of what their eating is like, what what their ketones are like. And just like the question asked, she's like, is it important to have these high ketones? Well, it's important if you're trying to reverse these health problems. If you're not at your ideal body weight, when I'm looking at, the help I gave for Grandma Rose, I needed her to have times where she could peak produce those ketones because it was a flex of her immune system for which she had cancer of her immune system. But I could prove that it was in pretty good shape. Whenever she would fast, she would put those ketones up into that 3.54 range. You had a really good response of her ketones. But that didn't happen when her insulin resistance was still nagging at her. So when somebody's saying, I'm 3 years into this, why don't I have better ketones than this? I'm the first to say that there is usually more going on than sometimes they want to talk about. For Gail, I would say those higher ketones you can improve. So first of all, yes, you want higher ketones when you stress your body. You're looking for how in shape your metabolism is by what you're doing in those 72-hour fasts. And if you're not reaching it, the time when you're not fasting is either not clean enough. And if you say, gosh, doc, it's as good as I can do. I'm down to a 6-hour eating window, but I got kids or grandkids or life. I just can't take it any tighter of an eating window. And I've cleaned up the rest of it. I don't put cream in my coffee anymore. I really do have a tight eating window. I would encourage them to push that eating window as close to sunrise as possible. And again, we go through that in the Keto Continuum and in the workbook. But if she's doing all those things, then I'm going to ask her to push her metabolism in other ways, whether that's some resistance exercise twice a week or getting into a sauna a couple times a week. I want to push her metabolism in another place. If she's maxed out for as much manipulation of her menu and eating patterns that she can. And 72 hours is as long as I would ever ask somebody to go. If you're not reaching high ketones at the end of a 72-hour fast, either your fast isn't clean enough, meaning I need salt and water only, black coffee, salt, water only during that fast, or the times when you're eating on non-fasting days, they're not clean enough. All right, that was a long answer, but I have been asked that several times before. So good question. All right, next, let's go to Julia, who says, have you ever seen loose skin heal without fasting? So what she's asking about is that autophagy, where the skin on your arm, that when they've been overweight, that skin curtain reabsorbs. I think it is very parallel to the previous question, which is you're going to have a tough time pushing yourself into autophagy once your body adapts into the place of a stable metabolism. So when people say, boy, I'm on the ketogenic diet and I'm losing weight, but I'm trying to lose this skin curtain or the excess skin. I'm like, you got to be touching autophagy to do that. And when they're not touching autophagy, the Dr. Boz ratios are not going to be in that 40 or less, or sometimes even into a 20 or less. So they might be losing weight, but to really reabsorb that skin, they either have to have such high metabolisms being pushed during the day when they are time restricted. So let's just go back to this. What happens if you don't push the keto continuum into a fast? So here is the example of that 16-8, where they limit their eating to 8 hours. And then we take them to the advanced 16-8, which is where they have to clean up their morning coffee, clean up their morning drink. And it isn't an accident that I have them do this after they've got the rhythm of keeping their hours just to those 8 hours per day. But then the next thing they do is they start to shrink those hours during they go from 8 hours to 7 hours to 6 hours to 4 hours. And if they say, gee, doc, that's all I can do, I really can't cut my hours any more than that. Well, then I make sure that those hours of eating are not happening after sunset, like you're pushing the hours closer to noon and especially overlapping that morning cortisol. But most people say, okay, this is ruining my life. I can't just eat 1 hour a day. I just can't seem to do it. They're not ready for that. And that's when I push them to say, okay, just stay where you're at and now push the metabolism into fasting. And that's really where we don't use the word fasting on the Dr. Boz channel unless it's 36 hours or more. And again, that is really only one day of going without food. Your body can do this. It was designed to do this. Excuse me. So don't freak out. But the reason we want to teach you about how to fast is because it is one way to stimulate your metabolism. And especially if you've got excessive storage, which is called fat. That's one way to tap into it. But we want you not just to empty the fat cells, we want you to recycle those unused proteins or those wasted proteins in the area of by pushing the body to fast. That's what really happens. So let me just remind you of the question here, because it is a good question. But I'm going to one more time say it out loud. Do you have to fast? I've never seen it without people figuring out fasting. So if you're struggling and you're saying, okay, it's this loose skin I'm working for, but I've got pretty good numbers and I feel just fine. I would be stepping over that threshold for at least once a week or maybe twice a month that you have a 36-hour fast, which is really only one day without fasting. I've given a lot of chapters, and in the world of fasting, I wrote some rules that I really have found helpful, which is be very mindful about why you're fasting and be helpful about in connecting the purpose of your fast to what you're trying to do, which is heal your body. I'm a big proponent of find something to pray about when you're fasting. They haven't been linked, prayer and fasting, for no reason. It really does help. All right, here's one of my favorite questions, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Patrick V, you get a bonus for asking this question. I see your son as a wrestler. Yes. As a former wrestler, how could I have benefited in competition using ketones, both physically and mentally? Oh my goodness, do I love this question. All right. So when I look at what I tell my son, okay, so having a wrestler, if you've ever looked at this sport, I didn't pick this for him. He picked this sport. I'm trying to be a good mom and saying, wow, he really does like it. He's really a go-getter. It's going to kill his mother watching him do this. But the key to wrestling, and it's very similar in the gymnastics world, that these lean athletes, every pound counts. And if you've watched what some of the habits are in this sport, as well as in gymnastics, they manipulate their bodies to try and lose weight. Well, I don't care about wrestling as much as I care about my son's brain. And as I go to these metabolic summits over the last few years, next to me would be sitting, the leading advisors for some of the best wrestling and gymnastic teams for the Olympics, about how do we have our athletes have peak performance of their muscles while not compromising their brains. So again, when they are in starvation mode, when they go from this high insulin state, this high carbohydrate fed athlete, and they don't have that metabolic flexibility of using ketones routinely versus having ketones be something their body's forced to do when they want to cut the sometimes 15, 20 pounds to get to the weight that they want. Now, they really don't advise that they do that. And my son, sorry, somebody said the mic volume dropped. My son cannot cut weight. His mother would be on his butt. No, that's not okay. I need your brain developing all throughout that wrestling season. But I'm going to help you with an environment that keeps you, like Christmas, 2 days before you have to weigh in, the treats were minimal. We still stuck with one meal a day. And we really helped him to reach that goal. But most importantly, I have him sip on ketones throughout his on and off season. The day I don't care about ketones are the day he's actually wrestling. That I want his body practicing using ketones and not using ketones, not using ketones. And of course, your body knows how to not use ketones. They don't need practice at that. So what am I really saying? I'm saying I want him actively in a state of ketosis for most of his workouts and for his off season when he's not really pushing as hard, but we're reminding that his metabolism is those mechanics of how do you use a ketone in peak moments of performance, and that is, are the cells ready to produce it and ready to use it? One of the key things that I love watching my son is that wrestlers, they have these intense workouts, so that isn't every one of them is strong and they're disciplined, and it's this lonely place to go and figure out how to be a good wrestler. Meaning you're on the mat by yourself, and the team that you work out with works out really hard, but you are on your own on that mat. But his best wrestling is in the second and third rounds, because as those other athletes, their energy just starts to fall. They are crabby, they get irritable, they make poor decisions, and they don't have the power they did 3 minutes ago when they had excess glucose. So as they push through that really intense workout, we're now in that second or third round. Boy, I love it. It's just awesome. I'm like, oh, there's the ketone power of somebody who's been training on a ketogenic side. So what would be the benefits of what I encourage my son to do? I have him sip on ketones. He's a teenage kid. He screws this up a lot, but as long as his body saw ketones, not only does it keep the inflammation low when he does get an injury, the fuel is longer and it's a better concentration. But the second part is you don't win at high school athletes because you're maybe there are places you win when you're the strongest person around, but especially for something like wrestling or gymnastics or even basketball, your brain has to be on peak performance as well as your physical performance. And when you're running out of glucose in and out of a match or in and out of a gymnastics competition or during a basketball game, that ability to perform mentally, to really be on your best mental game, is dependent on a fuel that is very fleeting. So I find that process of listening to what these advanced coaches do for some of the world's best, some of our country's best athletes, and knowing that I get to deliver that for my son as well is just a powerful antidote of why, one of the benefits of that I think I get to give him as a mom is here. I know wrestling is going to be a season. You're probably not going to go on to be a world athlete in wrestling. But what I do want is I want your brain development to stay the same. I don't want you to cut weight in a way that makes you so crabby. Nobody in our family wants to be around you. I want you to have excellent school performance at the same time you're doing wrestling season. And I've seen it when kids try to lose that weight, that they're so crabby. Every teacher's like, oh, just send him to the principal. I don't know, get him out of my class. He's so crabby. And it's during times when they're trying to cut weight to get to that performance for the coach. And so I just think what I have allowed him to do, or part of, it's him who's doing it, but the little bitty part that I played was I can teach him about metabolism and how important that stamina is for sustained energy, and to not run out of energy, and to keep a good attitude, not just his choice of an attitude, but fueled by a fuel that will support a stable mental attitude. All right. It's probably a little much, but I love that question, and it is wrestling season, and I just am super excited that I got to see one day of my kiddos wrestling yesterday and then recovered from life the next day. So thank you for writing that question, Patrick. All right, let's go next to Bev, who says, if I use flavored electrolyte mix like Relight from Redmond Salt, do you need to limit that to eating hours because of the stevia? So the answer to that really depends on if you're insulin resistant. Most of the people that watch this show are insulin resistant, and that insulin resistance will follow you for years. It's been several years since I've kind of lost the weight that was all related to insulin in my health. But as I coach other people, they can be at their lean body mass for a couple of years. And it's amazing how quickly one of those sugar substitutes will spike that insulin response, even when they've lost the weight. But you'll know that. So if you're checking your numbers, if you say, all right, I'm going to do this test. I'm going to wake up in the morning and 36 hours into my fast, before I eat, I'm going to check my glucose and my ketones. And then I'm going to have some of this Relight Redmond salt, which has just stevia. There's no calories in it. And then I want you to watch over the next 2 hours, doing a check every 15 minutes for the sugar and every half an hour for the ketones. so that you have at least twice as much data for the glucose. You're really trying to watch, does the glucose spike and then come back down after taking in stevia? And it is remarkable when I put continuous glucose monitors on my patients that have insulin resistance. Many times it's just to prove to them, look, you are still having an insulin response. Yes, I know the weight is off. Yes, I know you're doing better. But that journey is the cost of having that problem for the last several years and what that insulin does over time. So I would limit it to your hours of eating. The one place I make the exception is when the stevia is also coupled with the stevia is coupled with ketones. When you put ketones in a can like this, and I usually don't have this during my fast, but when I'm with you guys, I try to show you that, yes, the point of I'm trying to prove here is that it should raise your ketone numbers when you drink this. But there are lots of products out there that don't. So that's the place where you're putting in the fuel that you want the body to use, and there is going to be a response with most stevia. That's what is sweetened in the products that I use too. It is cheap. It is the lowest amount of stimulus that we have, but it is also the best is salt and water for a fast. So that would be the perfect answer. All right, let's go back to the next question. Okay. Despite definitely being in ketosis for 7 weeks, I feel a lack of energy and fatigue. Why? Anything I can do? I do wear my CPAP and my BMI is 24. Okay, so a couple of things that when people are persistent in their in that lack of energy, the first thing that comes to my mind for a lean person wearing CPAP, so you hit my hot buttons. You're at a pretty good ideal body weight, and you've got your oxygen at night, really important. So with those off the table, the second thing I would be looking at is, do you have enough magnesium? And again, I probably spent 3 weeks reading all the magnesium articles when I was writing the book, saying, good Lord, what is the punchline here? Why is this so hard? It was to the point where I'm like, I'm just going to put a protocol in my clinic that I'll put magnesium in through an IV. That's not what I do. But it was like frustrating to see there are 15 different flavors of magnesium. This is what this one does. That's what this one does. Some of them, when you have leaky gut, you cannot trust that it's getting in. And the process was punchline. Go for 4 magnesium floats over 10 days. Really, that's what, if you were coming to my support group and you were still having that problem, I would say before we take on one more thing, I can't do anything. You can't make a difference of your energy if your body's magnesium is low. And when people come into the ketogenic journey, they have a gut that leaks out many things, especially these micronutrients like magnesium. We're all low on it, but they are particularly low when they've had a gut issue. So being in ketosis and having that anti-inflammatory effect, you're going to have a gut that's healthier in a year. But 7 weeks in, we want you feeling better. So use your skin. Go into a magnesium float, and do this 4 times in 10 days and watch what happens. I mean, the worst thing that happens is you spend I think they sell them in packages of 3 or 4. So let's say you spend $100 on this package of 3 or 4 floats. That's the cheap price to pay to say, okay, now we can look into other reasons why your metabolism might not be doing what it's supposed to. But magnesium is so common, and it is so stinking easy to fix if they just say, you got to put enough in to get that threshold back up to where it belongs. And then, of course, if they're unhealthy, if they've had a gut issue, you might have to keep going every couple of weeks until your body does heal. But it will heal, and you'll feel so much better. You shouldn't be feeling that by 7 weeks. You should be feeling good energy by 7 weeks. So it makes me curious. I mean, there's several other brain things that I would think to do, but for step 1 is magnesium. All right, we're going to go on to Greg. That was a good question, by the way. We're going to go to Katie, who says, does using a hot tub have the same stress effect as using a sauna? Well, I'll tell you that the sauna, specifically the Finnish sauna, as in those from Finland, the ones with steam, with rocks and dry heat, and you can put steam on it and get it moist air. Those saunas have the most data. Like, you cannot argue with how much is out there on what happens in a sauna for metabolic health. Like, hands down, crazy amount of data with saunas. Now, there is some extrapolation that part of what is improving the sauna is the time spent in that temperature stress. And that's where the infrared saunas get, if they're sweating, that's where they get a lot of their like validity. Hot tubs, that's the same place they draw it from, is if we can increase that body temperature that we are causing a sweat. So I know it's kind of hard to think, am I sweating? I'm in a hot tub. I mean, but you should be perspiring and hold the sweat for a good 20 minutes in that hot tub. So again, a sauna really gets its literature and its confidence from the data that has come out of Finland, and it's like amazing amounts of data. Like, you cannot argue with this. The places that try to piggyback onto that data include hot tubs, and they include infrared saunas, do the same thing. Now they've got some literature, but I really think it's going to be hard to fight against the ones that are based on finished sauna. All right, so Teresa, this question was interesting. As I was reading it, I'm like, okay, I'm not sure if I know what she's asking, but I'm going to read it out loud and let you hear my thoughts on it. Do postmenopausal women need more or less fat since our hormones decline after menopause? Okay, so I think the right place to focus is, are you eating enough to feel satiated? Do you feel full? When people start chasing numbers like, did I have enough fat? Did I have enough protein? I need this for my hormones, I start calling BS. It's like, don't do that. Focus on what your body chemistry is telling you first thing in the morning. And if you have a Dr. Boz ratio of 40 or less, whatever you're eating is adequate. When I look at people's mistake that they make menopausally, they start, and I said this last week, I've said this several times, one more drink here, is that they start to look at the different ways that they can add those hormones to their body. So as your hormones decline, how much fat you have doesn't play into how many of the hormones you make. And even if you're postmenopausal and you're not making as much of the sex-based hormones as you were, there's plenty of fat-based hormones that you're still making, and those are dependent on insulin. So insulin is approximated by your Dr. Boz ratio. So the better question would be, is postmenopausal women, do they struggle with getting their Dr. Boz ratio to 40 or less? Yes, they do. They do. Their metabolisms are different. But can they do that? Absolutely. They are some of the strongest people I know. And when they have the rules laid out and we say, okay, here's what you do next. If you get to your target numbers, great. Stay there and carry on. And then the next one, if you get to your target numbers, stay there and carry on. If you don't, go down to the next step. So as you look at the keto continuum, not everybody needs to go to step 12 to reach ideal metabolism. But if you're stuck, if your numbers aren't getting where you want, if you're not feeling good, there are some hacks that we can talk about, but for the most part, it means move on to the next one. Stress your metabolism a little further. And especially when they hit a plateau, it just means, hey, your body got used to this. Now what? Speaking of getting used to, Greg writes in and says, when can we start adding more than 20 total carbs into your diet? How to proceed to do so? Well, I'll tell you, Greg, I'm several years into this, and I will tell you that on the days that I'm not having Christmas, I still keep carbs at 20 or less. That when you look at people with insulin resistance, I just feel better. When I start to add back carbs, especially, you're going to have a response of that insulin come back to most people. And that insulin causes that brain to swell. It's going to cause your foggy brain. It's going to decrease your energy, decrease your mental acuity. So it's not, I don't like saying the word forever. I'm human. I had sugar for Christmas. I didn't like it, and I had only a small amount as compared to what I did over Thanksgiving. But maybe it's because it's wrestling season and I was trying to be a really good mom. But for the bigger picture here, those 20 total carbs are the best way to guarantee that you can stay in that place of repairing a body as fast as it's trying to age. I find that when people migrate north towards that 40, 50, 60, some people have enough exercise, or they get in that sauna or maybe that hot tub, and they push their metabolism hard enough to still stay in a constant state of ketosis, even with a few more carbohydrates. So if you are adding back carbs and you want to know if it's safe, check your numbers. Plot them, not just once, plot the numbers. And you will find that most people say, just doesn't pay off. Sometimes they'll do really good on the first few days. They'll add their carbs back with Brussels sprouts and cabbage. And then the other ones come in. And then that's where they end up falling off. They end up gaining weight back, not feeling as good, back on blood pressure medicines, that kind of stuff. All right, Karen S. says, how do you deal with ghrelin keeping you from sleeping? So ghrelin is that hormone that really can make we feel hungry, kind of like a gremlin after midnight. You put a little water on it and it will eat anything. Ghrelin is part of that. But ghrelin, like insulin, can be a hormone that we grow resistant to. So as you're trying to reset it, you will find times where you really want to eat at bedtime. And I have found that there's no other way through this. You got to stop eating and reset that hormone. So I really use salt even at bedtime. I'm a good sleeper, so when I really get crabby and I know that I'm going to eat, I just go to bed and shut off, because at least I'm not eating. So the other parts, though, are you got to get through those first couple. Food right before bed is a terrible habit for your metabolism. When I am working with people to get over that, I start with a 36-hour fast. I mean, usually they're on KetoCONTINUUM number 4 or 5 or 6. And then I say, all right, you're farting around, you're playing around, and you're breaking rules, and you need to step over a threshold. You're not going to die from sunrise to sunset. You're going to have nothing but salt water or black coffee. And it's amazing, actually, how freeing they feel after that second or third 36-hour fast. Like, I didn't think I could do that. And what they're really doing is they're stretching their endocrine system to go back to what would be normal. But theirs isn't normal, because they've been eating like a teenager for 30 years. And they're not a teenager. They're not a teenager. All right. Teresa writes in. So the answer to Karen's question is you fast and you continue to work your way down that keto continuum, and you're not immune to having to learn that. We all had to learn that. I had to learn that. Every support group I've ever been in, nobody says, I just did that fast thing, no problem. It was no big deal. No, they have to mentally prepare, and they're like, oh my goodness, am I going to be able to do this? So you're not alone, but do it. You got to do it. All right. How do I make sure I am not under eating my protein and fat? Would it be considered adequate as long as my chemistry or my Dr. Boz ratio is below 80? Yeah, that's exactly the answer that I was pushing those other questions for, is people are like, well, how much do I eat? And when it comes to protein, there are some numbers that you can follow, 1.5 grams of protein per kilograms of body muscle mass. That's a long equation. I go through that in the book, and I do outline that that's an option. But I have really learned to say, you know what, if you're eating keto carnivore, which is what most people end up on after they've been at 20 carbs or less, are like, wow, that's not a lot. So they really learn that those vegetables even get shoved away. They just lead to eating more vegetables. It turns into some cravings. And so if you're doing that, if you're eating mostly keto carnivore, they don't have to track protein. They're eating plenty of protein. And it's the kind of protein their body absorbs. But if you wake up in the morning and your Dr. Boz ratio, and I mean first thing in the morning, is 80 or less, you're doing great. You're doing a lot of things right. If you're not at the goal you want, march yourself down that keto continuum a little further. Start restricting the hours to less hours during the day you allow food in, and then nothing after sunset. Push yourself to a couple of 36-hour fasts. That's how you would tweak the Dr. Boz ratio. All right, Sandra, you are definitely after my heart here. When will you have a concierge type retreat? Oh my goodness. Well, it's on my bucket list. I am a huge proponent of community. I mean, why do I come in when I was definitely sick enough to stay home by anybody's standards? I'm feeling better, but I definitely was crabby this morning and not feeling well. But I love community. I love showing up and hearing your questions and answering your questions. I love announcing that I finally get to start my own support group here in Tampa, which I don't know, it took me 6 months to figure it all out, but I'm really excited. So to have a concierge type retreat would be like a dream come true. But they're definitely expensive. And I think there's a rhythm that I want to hit in my professional, in the clinic here and in my new community. Before I do that, I'll also share that there's a lot of risks that go into a physician medical license and being insured to do something like a concierge type retreat where the patient doesn't live near you. It's awful, actually. That's what's taken so long, is to try and find, look at how expensive it is to find that kind of coverage, and then how many people were actually going to come and take advantage of it, as opposed to what I think is a better model, is a better cost benefit ratio, which is buy the online course and teach the people around you. Practice this as a group around you. So let me example what a group does. Let me get back to practicing my own support group, which makes me a better teacher. It helps me to stay in this moment. And then the people who come see me are going to come see me because they can't get better with the simple steps in the book. They can't get better with the workbook. When I've looked into doing retreats, this is my second announcement that I wanted to make sure I said out loud, is that I've been invited a few places. I think many of you know that I did a bunch of teaching on brains, and I have a brain course that it's my baby. I love it. I love teaching about what brains do. And I'm overwhelmed by the hunger people have to want that peak performing brain. I shared a few weeks ago what my kids accidentally learned by being in my household over the last 20 years, and talking about brains and teaching other people about brains, and then how many other families don't know that. So that brains course I perfected through the Department of Defense when I was really doing a bunch of their lecture series. And now I don't do that for them anymore, and which gives me the freedom to do some things like an online course of the same content, which I couldn't do prior to that. But there was a very special community that invited me to do some of that teaching. In fact, if you've taken the online course, the place that it was recorded was in Pella, Iowa. Well, Pella, Iowa has invited me to come back and do an encore teaching for them. I think it's the first week in June. So if you know anything about these support communities, they raise the money to have me come in, but they offer it as a free educational opportunity for anybody that wants to come. So we'll talk more about it as it gets closer, but I just wanted to share with you. I know lots of you have said, I would love to come see you do this in person. How do you deliver this in person? And it's great. It's my favorite things. But I just kind of worked out the details about that first week in June that I will go to Pella, Iowa to do this. And if you're looking for a place to retreat with me, it's the cutest damn town ever in the middle of Iowa. But they, like any community, suffer from addiction too. And their way of improving it is to educate as many people as possible to come to Pella, Iowa, and join me for the retreat, for the 2-day brain course. And I would love for you to be part of that community as well. Support that system. I mean, they measure their outcome by how many people come to the event. So I would love to put my energy towards that. All right, keep going here. Gosh, I could talk for 2 hours here. Julia writes in, how is it possible to gain weight, although rather short term, in spite of a good DBR? The way you gain weight despite a DBR is calories. They do matter when you get into this advanced layers, but you're pushing the metabolism by muscle straining. That's the truth. If you're going to gain weight on a ketogenic diet in a healthy way, so the DBR is staying low, so your insulin's staying low, how would you gain weight? Well, the only place that's going to be allowed to gain weight with your DBR that low is muscle replication. How do muscles replicate in adults? You tear them and you repair them. So that's resistant training, and those are pretty hardcore workouts. But how does my son, who's a wrestler, gain weight while he's in a constant state of ketosis? He has workouts that are crazy. They're crazy workouts. His mother doesn't do that. But that's the inside scoop. If you're going to gain weight, it's going to be the kind of weight that really protects you in longevity. It's the kind of weight that you want to put on. And it's in the setting of a good DBR, which says it's a healthy weight gain, which is muscle weight gain, not fat weight gain. So that means you're going to need some resistant training. You might want to look into a little CrossFit or a coach or something. All right. Another question by Julia. She had some really good questions. I hope I get to several of her other ones, actually. Will pushing exogenous ketones stop our own ketone production once our liver gets going? The research suggests a limiting effect around 5. Yes. So exogenous ketones, again, where I really encourage them to be used, is that it keeps your cells remembering what to do. It also keeps the brain working in a much better mental, emotional place, as well as peak cognition. So when you look at the ketogenic diet, you don't tune into this channel if you're perfect and you've never had a problem. People that show up here, they're like me. They've had troubles. They've struggled. And when the journey of being on a ketogenic diet hits reality, where you fall off and you have a tough day, or you comfort yourself with food like you used to, getting back on it is really where those exogenous ketones, just the longer you go without ketones in circulation, ketones are a signaling agent. So as they're in circulation, they're signaling the body to do certain things. But you're right. When you look at like one time I had ketones on the show, and I don't know if it just was timing or what, but it was like so high that they couldn't measure them on my meter. I'm like, okay, that was a little excessive, but that's not usually the case. The research does say you shouldn't make them go that high. So you're trying to sip on them to keep that available. Other things that happen when you're sipping on exogenous ketones is you suppress appetite. So that's the other little trick that I tell my son and any of his wrestling friends that listen is, if you're trying to cut weight, suppress your appetite. I mean, circulating ketones really do decrease the hunger. But you're right. Don't go higher than 5. That's a lot. So you got the right. You have the right approach there is what I meant to say. All right. What tweaks, if any, would you make for someone who needs to spare? What tweaks, if any, would you make for someone who needs to spare and build muscle in their more mature years? Okay, so what I think you're trying to say is, as you have traveled around the sun a few times, you're past the age of 50, maybe even 60, and you want to build muscle. Well, the key thing for that is that you do have a pretty good number of ketones. We'd want those ketones to be above 1.5 or in the 2 range. Exogenous ketones do help with that, actually. And you do have to actually use the muscles. You're gonna be a little sore the next day. Like, not so sore you can't get off the toilet, but enough that you've pushed your body, that you tore the muscles and now you have to repair them. So I would push people to do resistance training 3 to 4 times a week. Don't start there. Start with a couple times a week. Heal before you go back in. That's one of the key things for elders as they return to a resistance training workout plan, is they have this idea that they can go to the gym 5 times a week. I'm like, start with 2. And you want to heal before you go back in. You don't want to be hurting on the days you're in there again. So it is a process. Karen, this is a really good question too. I know we're at the top of the hour, so I'll do 2 more questions. There was a couple of other ones that were really good too. I'm not going to get to them. let's see. What is the effect of the medication for ADHD in a young person with a growing brain? Well, ADHD is definitely a diagnosis that is quite common. I have lots of empathy because I take care of lots of people who truly do have, and some grew out of their ADHD. But what I have found is I don't use that term until I know they've been in a state of ketosis. That it's amazing how much that food choice does regulate their symptoms, like decrease them a lot. So maybe you already know that a ketogenic journey is really helpful for people's brains that have fleeting thoughts and lack of focus. Like all of us, we all do better with that stable fuel as opposed to the glucose, which is a lot more volatile and does change over time. But the medications for ADHD, boy, they've put a lot of studies in them, and they really have looked at what those regulated doses do for kids. And they don't just measure how well do they do on tests. They also measure how well they did socially. When kids with ADHD, the longer they are annoying to other people because of their erratic behavior and their impulsivity, they really struggle with friendships. They really struggle with those relationships, and they start to identify as somebody who just doesn't have those. And that's really detrimental to the long-term mental health of these kids. So by using the medications, you're not just improving that they focus better. You're helping with some of those relationship problems. So I'm very careful to say anything negative about the struggle of the balance of a physician and a parent trying to come up with a medication that's, no parent wakes up one day and says, I just want them on all the meds. They don't say that. Not the ones I take care of. They want the best for their kid. And when their child is isolated and alone because their behavior is so uncontrollable, they will put them on a ketogenic diet. They will see that improvement, but sometimes they still do need the medications. All right. Last one is for multiple sclerosis because I'm a huge MS. Have you had success in treating MS patients with a DBR, and what was the ratio they needed to be able to reverse or at least lessen the progression? This is super close to my heart. I might cry as I answer this. I have several friends who have MS, and they have lots of people telling them what to do. I don't step into that arena, but I have patients that have also had MS, and their Dr. Boz ratio needs to be tight. It is a 40 or less kind of approach. I'll tell them they often have to supplement to stay there, much like the question that Eileen writes a couple down, where it says, is it Eileen? Yeah, the one at the bottom. An elder parent starting to have short-term memory loss. Supplements are really what does matter in people who are taking care of some of these advanced problems, and they have a timer on it. MS has a timer on it. We know that that's an autoimmune process, so we really want that Dr. Boz ratio to be 40 or less. That is I've seen the best success. To kind of weave Eileen's answer into that, when I really do encourage my MS patients and my short-term memory problem patients to consume the C8, C10. I know that she mentions that it caused diarrhea. The diarrhea is dose related. Start with one capsule of the C8, C10. Continue to use the BHB. That's a short-term, that at least their body's getting used to using ketones. But without finding a way to use the C8, C10 to get C8, C10 in their diet, it's really hard to keep the numbers sustained. So Eileen, I would probably say the same thing to the MS patient is you're going to want to supplement. You're going to want to supplement. You're going to want to supplement. That C8, C10, that's why I have the soft gels. I know you can get liquid out there and put it in coffee and all that stuff. But where I see people like completely give up is they end up with diarrhea and then they say, I just can't do that. Start with one soft gel capsule. It's helpful when you buy it from Dr. Boz. It's very supportive of my channel. This is how I can continue to do the things I do. So thank you for those that do buy off of my channel. If you buy the capsules, when you buy 4 of them, you'll be only charged for the price of 3. So anything that's in a capsule, I have that rule on my website, bozmd.com. But the reason I put my name behind it, which was a total pain in the butt to get these products available and out to the world, is because so many people gave up without trying the C8, C10, and they were the ones with the timer on. They were the mild cognitive disorders. They were the severe demyelinating issues like Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS, MS, and those are the most painful deaths to watch, is when their brains, a preventable process could have been prevented if the inflammation was low and held low. In order for those patients to have success, we have to use supplements. So that's where I put my energy behind that. I put my name behind it. I've taken some major hits in this industry because I'm new to this game. But all right, I will call it a wrap. I know there were other really good questions down here, but I am going to, in the spirit of time, go back to our chat, check my numbers, and say I do really look forward to next year. If you haven't found a plan for your new year, put Tuesday nights on your plans to join us. I really do enjoy answering the questions of everybody on the channel. I'll continue to do the same approach that I did in the last part of of 2021, which is at the end of all the shows, at least the last 20, hopefully the last 30 minutes of every show. I do what I just did here the last 2 weeks, which is answer your questions. I tried really hard to find a way to answer all the emails and all the blog posts and all the Instagrams and all of it. And I said, okay, we're going to stick with the lives. I'll answer all the questions on the lives. All right. So I'm going to test this again. Again, the purpose of testing at the end isn't to do anything except say, hey, here's what it looks like at the beginning. Here's what it looks like at the end. This is a real-time check of my numbers and my ketones. So my ketones did go up a little bit. My glucose is about the same. So glucose of 83, ketones of 1.1. And for my last 48 hours, that's pretty good for me. That's pretty good. So I want to remind everybody that if you're checking out this on replay, we have, on replay, I actually wanted to show you one of my favorite things about a bet that I made with my son. This was several years ago, but it's one of my favorites. And he's just had a really good semester in his first semester of college. So you can look at him at 15, and I thought it was adorable. So we're going to watch that on replay. You can click that if you're watching this on replay. You can click that end screen for that. But I do really want to say Happy New Year, Merry Christmas to everybody, and we are going to have a great 2022. Join us in our email campaign by signing up on our website. And until then, we are going to continue to improve your health one ketone at a time.